Today we're at the European Championships in streetlisting organized by Final Rep, and we have many of Europe's strongest streetlifters here in this room. We will ask them tips on recovery, on training frequency. Let's see what they answer. Get a coach.
Don't buy an ice bath.
Don't peak all the time.
Training less can help you more.
Don't get enough sleep.
I'm 25 years old. 2019 I started streetlifting and I started calisthenics at 2013.
I am 25 years old. I started weighted calisthenics in 2019 roughly.
I'm 31 years old. I'm competing since 2019.
I am 26 years old and I started streetlifting in 2019.
I'm 27 years old. I started streetlifting in 2019.
I'm 27 years old. I started calisthenics or streetlifting in 2017. My first streetlifting competition was in 2022.
My name is Nadine. I'm 23 years old. I started streetlifting about 2 years ago.
My name is Michael Schulz. I'm turning 31 next week. And what was the last part?
When did you start with streetlifting?
When did I start? When did you start? I don't know. It's like 10 years ago somewhat. We called it weighted calisthenics back then.
My name's Owen Gale. I'm 39 years old. I started streetlifting specifically, compete April 2023.
I am 27 years old and I started streetlifting 1.5 years ago.
I'm 21 years old. I will be 22 on Tuesday, and I started streetlifting 3 years ago, a little bit more.
My favorite lift is the dip.
The dip?
Definitely the dip.
Definitely the muscle up? No, the dip.
I'd say the dip. Like I studied it, posted about everything. It's like the dip is, I studied it.
My PR is like 140 kilo, which I want to break tomorrow.
PR is now 83.5.
My PR, let's call it a training PR, is 200.5 and valid in competition I did 190.
My favorite lift there being my 285 kg squat probably.
You ask for the PRs. For muscle up it's 53 kilograms, pull up 116.25 kilograms, dips 182.5 kilograms, and squat 232.5 kilograms.
My favorite lift is my 100 kg pull-up because it was very hype and too much energy.
My favorite lift, I would say, is the muscle up probably, or the chin up.
My favorite movement right now is probably the ring muscle up. My PR is 18.5.
My favorite lift currently is probably muscle up because it's going the best. On the last competition I did 30 and I think I still have some left.
Think probably patience.
Doing poor form.
They rush.
They don't pay enough attention to technique.
Chasing numbers, constantly chasing a specific number.
I think the biggest mistake you can do in streetlifting when you start streetlifting is going all in too many times. People see great athletes on Instagram and think, okay, I have to achieve this and I have to train as hard as them. And then as soon as the first struggle, the first plateau hit them, they just quit. You have to keep going, but on a constant level and not try to peak every time.
They only focus on going very close to failure as fast as possible, and I think that's not good for your progress. You should think about your technique.
People always want to go in and hit the fast PR and going very fast. And then as you know, tendons, ligament, it wears off pretty fast if you always go for more weight.
I think the biggest mistake when you start streetlifting is that you think that it is a sprint, because it really isn't. It takes a long time to build strength, so you should definitely see it as like a marathon.
I think the biggest mistake is that they are trying to push too early, too hard, and train too hard to muscle failure.
I think the biggest mistake is to think that life is train hard, train hard. Before train hard, you have to train smart.
Wanting and doing too much at once without having a real understanding of a training structure and having someone that is managing them so that they can actually achieve those goals.
To have a coach.
Get a coach.
To find a coach.
To get a coach. You often don't see things on yourself which would you see on others. I think that helps a lot, especially for the long term.
Because when I started, I improved, but I feel like I could have improved faster if I had known all the information that my coach taught me.
That you should definitely enjoy the journey and not only the results, because if you are so fixed on certain numbers, you can get disappointed and yeah, it will be a hard time. So definitely enjoy the journey.
Training harder is not always the answer. I always try to push everything. I try to max out every session and just do all the exercises I could and wanted always to do more, but more is not always more, unfortunately.
Be more more aware about my technique by filming myself more often to be able to check the progress by myself instead of waiting for my coach to tell me.
Training less can help you more, because I started with I think 7 sessions per week, and now I'm training 3 times a week and still doing better progress than ever before. The part of recovery people are underestimating very often, and part of the recovery is also the frequency of your training sessions.
You cannot maximize stimulus of a single session. There is 100% in a session that you can have, and by training more and giving more, you cannot amplify the session. So it's the next session and the next session and the next session. So it's a long-term game, and it's not about getting the session better, it's about having more sessions over time. And that's how you get that staying injury-free, good programming, good nutrition, not getting ill. It's much more important than having a good session.
There's a massive focus on building what I refer to as a strength base. So it's building strength at higher repetitions, so not so much high intensity. If I build that, it allows me to peak to a higher peak for when I want to ramp up and obviously peak for a lift, as opposed to constantly staying at like over 90% of my 1RM, where I'm always going to be susceptible to an injury because I'm training at such a high intensity. So I think having focus on that, building that base for most of my time and then peaking just for the last 8 weeks allows me not to push things too far. I mean, weak things break, so if I'm always at that high intensity, something's going to break it at that point.
Do first a warm-up for the wrist, for the shoulders, and use a resistance band for warm-up, for pull-up or dips, and do body weight exercise, and then I start with the weights.
I try to listen to my body. If my plan says I have to do like RPE 8 and certain weights, but after the warm-up I feel like, nah, I'm not gonna move that weight at that RPE. I have to put my ego beside and have to lift a lighter weight, or even have to cut the workout if it's too hard. Ego is the biggest killer.
I try to work with reps in reserve, so I try to not to overload too much so that I don't get injured.
With carefully managing the volume, I would say. During this peaking, I noticed that my posterior chain was close to its limit, and so we had to reduce a few sets of Romanian deadlift, just cut down the volume a bit so that I could still push my squat, but I had to do a little bit less volume because overuse is what causes injuries at the end.
Finding the sweet spot of how heavy you can actually go. And this is a try and error. So you have some numbers you can look up at books, on the internet, on your favorite athletes, but then you will have to adapt it to your own. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to change your training program all the time, but sometimes try a slower pace, a faster pace, and see how it feels. And be honest to yourself. This is the most important thing. If you're not honest to yourself, if you say, yeah, this was an RP8, but it was literally an RP10, then you will be most likely injured in a few weeks because you're just tricking yourself into something that is not real.
I think it's very important to focus on sleep minimum 8 to 9 hours per day. Basically not being very close to failure very often, choosing wisely when to attempt a PR or to max out.
The stronger I got, I actually trained less. Like, the still common sense is that you need to train more, but you're getting stronger. That means every rep has more quality, more stimulus, and more stress on the body. So the stronger you get, you start to train less actually, and not more. I just try to take a look at not optimizing stimulus, but recovery towards the next session. That works much better than managing stimulus as managing recovery.
Don't peak all the time. Like in the beginning, I wanted to peak and get a PR every week or every month, and now I almost never peak, only during competitions.
Oh, that's pretty easy. Eat well, sleep a lot, and don't have a lot of stress.
If you manage your sleep pretty well, then most of your workouts will turn out pretty good.
Sleeping a lot. Also to do good mobility exercises, because that's a very common source of pain and injuries. Do good warm-ups and look at your form to make sure you're doing everything, properly.
Sleep and eat. Sleep and eat. How much do you sleep? I try to sleep minimum 8 hours a day.
I sleep around 9 hours a night.
To get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night and to eat good. and eat a lot. Protein, carbs, and yeah, some fats too.
Don't buy an ice bath. It's always the basics. Don't go ego lifting in your sessions. Get some proper sleep. Try to eat like an adult, helps. And that's about it. Those three things. That's like 99%. And everything else, supplements, ice bathing, it's like the last 1%.
My advice at recovery is getting routines, like routines with everything. If you have a good sleeping routine, getting into bed at the same time every day, standing up or getting up at the same time every day, eating frequently, and as I said, don't overshoot your training. If it's week 1, you should train at RPE 5 to RPE 6. Don't go for RPE 10 just because your favorite lifter hit a new world record total, for example.
I do for rest days when I train only street lifting, sleep a lot, take my supplements, and yeah, eat healthy. Yeah, when I train street lifting, so when I train freestyle, I have more training days.
I think the biggest mistake is sleep. People just don't get enough sleep, and then looking at other things that you can maybe invest in to help speed up recovery. So whether that be access to like a sauna, things like dry needling, if you can get access to red light therapy, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, any of these things can help speed up the recovery process. So I think the more things you can sort of tap into based on maybe what your budget allows, the more you're going to be able to recover.
As a beginner, you won't hit a perfect technique in a short amount of time. So technique will have to adapt also with the weight you're moving. So the heavier the weight gets, the more your technique will adapt to the weight. But technique work will always be a major thing to do in your training. I'm training for 5 years right now, constantly street lifting, and my dip technique is not perfect yet. So it's not always on point. This should give you an idea about how inconsistent technique might be and how much work you have to put in, and you have to work on it constantly. So there is not this short-term goal technique, it's a long-term goal, muscle mass, technique, and training consistency.
I mean, I would say a lot. As I said earlier, you need to build a good foundation with all the exercises to create good patterns in all the exercises, and then you can forget about it and just improve weight, you know? But I think it's very good to have this foundation.
Technique is the most important thing for beginners. To don't injure yourself. With technique, you can improve your level too much more than with only power. If you train only power, it will take too much years to have a good level. But if you train technique, maybe in 1 year, 2 years, you have a good level.
Overrated, I would say. Every technique has an amount you can train it, and the better the technique is, the more often and the more weight you can train it. But even a bad technique, as every beginner has, allows to accumulate stimulus and to get better. No one needs to do 10 sets of pull-ups, then you get injured with bad form. But if you just do 3 or 4, it's probably fine, and just develop over time.
For me, technique should be right at the top of importance. If you look at the best street lifters in the world, they all have definitely one thing in common, and that is optimal technique. If you can focus on technique in the early stages, this will allow you not to build up bad habit, which is going to be hard to get rid of as you get stronger and stronger.
Bulgarian split squat, because it improves the squat itself a lot, and you cannot push too much volume on the squat.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to say 1 for upper body and 1 for lower body. Okay, I'm going to say 3, okay? So for pull would be pull over in the cable machine, you know? So then for push, I would say tricep extensions. I don't see many people doing them. For legs, I mean, underrated, I would say like back extensions, lower back extensions, you know, in the bench.
Biceps curls, leg extensions, leg curls, everything. These exercises are, in my opinion, often underestimated because they can help you a lot to work on your weaknesses you might see in your lifts.
All shoulders accessories, because of shoulders injuries are too much on street lifting.
In my case, as I don't have a background in calisthenics, I would say abs or core, because I find it very hard to control my abs, and I think they are very, very important in the 4 movements.
It's not underrated, but I would go with curls. Like the curl is very powerful for the muscle up, for the chin up. Yeah, do your curls.
The main lift variations, but you have to understand why and when to use them. You have to know your weak points and what exercises would address that weak point and get better in it.
When it comes to squatting, because this is a big part of street lifting, because it adds a lot to your total, I'd say the posterior chain, specifically lower back, is what what should be focused on. So any form of back extension, whether it's flat, incline, reverse hyperextensions, making sure you pair this with some form of abdominal movement so that we get structural balance. And then I'd say a lot of people suffer with elbow injuries, so like tendonitis and stuff like that, golfer's elbow, tennis elbow. So looking at improving mobility of supination, so some form of wrist supination could help. And then again, pairing it with the opposite, so wrist pronation.
I think it's just a big intrinsic motivation and love for training. It's fun, I love going to the gym and having my routine.
My motivation in dips is definitely Matthew. I mean, I started in, as I said, 2019. Hit 140 in dip, and he was, I don't know, 14 years old, already dipping 150, and in 2019 he hit 195 or something. But overall, it's the sport and the community. Every time I compete at the international stage, I enjoy it more and more because people are so friendly and so open-minded, and it's a great atmosphere. And I never experienced that in any other sport I did in my life, and I did a lot of judo in my younger ages.
I think it's the game itself to beat myself every day. I don't have to watch other people like I have to beat them. I just want to beat me.
The people on the competitions and the feeling on the competition. Like the workouts are not like the things you like or you like to do, but when you're on the competition, see the people, feel the atmosphere, that pushes every time, and you know you have a goal, like the next competition, you know the way is gonna be hard, but the competition is gonna be amazing.
Competition, and I have to be the best version of myself. I have to push myself to see my limits.
This competition, the strong, amazing women that are starting to do street lifting, and of course Peracol, my coach.
Fighting my age, probably. I always have the fear of being at the point where I just need to fight to keep my level and not progressing anymore, and that's a good motivation.
So at first it was a little hard to push my limits because there was not a lot of competition, but now I saw during this European Championship that there definitely is, so I'm very hyped to get back to training because of the competition.
My biggest motivation, probably myself. I'm never content with what I achieve, so it's like when I achieve something big, I need to improve that. So that's the first thing. And I think now, because the level's constantly improving within street lifting, seeing other people who are now chasing me and right behind me, that motivates me more to obviously make it known that I am the best in this category.
Breaking my own records, I guess, being better, getting a better total, the 600 kilo total, for example. Thank you. Thank you very much.